get started, people. Good morning, good afternoon, afternoon, everyone. I'm gonna stop my video here shortly, help out with some audio issues, but hopefully you can see what I'm sharing out on the screen in front of me. Today's Tech Talk webinar is a little short webinar session on customizing the agent and or supervisor desktop. Of course, this is within the Webex world. Webex Contact Center, not Webex Contact Center Enterprise, but Webex Contact Center. My name is Mike Keitzer. I'm an instructor here with Sunset Learning. I've worked here for quite a long time, as some of you are aware. Some of you old timers out there we've known for a long time. We appreciate, again, you attending. And again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be today. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to go to the next slide, give you a little bit of information about the agenda. I'm going to also pause my video right about here. That'll just help out with a couple of things. And just a quick agenda overview. What is it we're going to talk to you about today? Well, really the part of the big news we'll get to more in detail towards the end is the new Webex Advanced Admin course. We'll certainly mention more about. But as far as the content goes today, going to describe to you within regards to personalizing the Webex desktop layout for your agents and supervisors. First off, some helpful. And then we've got, as far as the desktop layout itself, really a three-part adventure here. First thing we'll be talking about is the desktop layout overview itself. Desktop layout itself is in a JSON file format. We'll describe to you exactly what that JSON file format does for you in regard to teams that you'd be configuring this on behalf of. Personas fall into one of three categories: agents, supervisors, or a combination therein. And again, this all applies to the contact center desktop. So big picture overview of the desktop layout, get into what we'll define as personalizing the desktop layout, personalizing the adding in a corporate header, perhaps corporate logo, perhaps enabling Webex Chat within the desktop itself, as well as maybe a simple screen pop you might incorporate. And really the meat of this conversation that seems to have drawn most of you in is how to add a reporting widget to your desktop. We'll show you a couple iterations of that. Using iFrame widgets, we'll show you how to add maybe a single or perhaps multiple reports per page, if that's something that you need to do. Just as a reminder here, as we're into the session now with 131 attendees, welcome if you're just joining us. If you have some questions along the way, please post those into the Q&A window. If you don't mind, into the Q&A window, and myself or Eden along the way will try to answer those questions as we go, based, of course, on what that question actually is. Let's see. At the end of our discussion on customizing the desktop layout, we'll go over to a live demo and show you exactly what is forthcoming in the slides. Q&A session towards the end there. And make sure you stick around towards the very end because we've got some marketing information and promos and more information on this class that's coming up. Okay, great. Let's go to the next slide. All right, there we go. So here's just a real quick heads up overview on this new course. This new course is going to be labeled WXCCA. The A stands for Advanced Admin. More detail on that a little bit forthcoming, a little bit more in-depth discussion. We are going to try our best to try to keep all of you, as well as our salespeople, sane with the acronyms and the courses and what course you should attend. Don't forget, currently we have a course named AWXCC. The A is at the beginning of that acronym or initialism there. That's our 4-day initial admin course that we, of course, would like you to attend before the advanced admin course. We also have a CWCCE course. That's really the 4-day admin course with an additional day for partners. Some of you have attended out there. Those courses will remain in place. And we've got some information upcoming on some proposed modules for our new course that we'll get into more depth forthcoming, even with some Q&A sessions. One thing to point out is that this topic we're going to talk about today is included as one of the topics in the new advanced admin course. Not something we do currently in the admin course. We mention it, but we'll get a lot more in depth, as you'll see here shortly. So again, more information coming up here in 1 second on this WXCC advanced course. What we're going to do right at this point in time is pop up our first poll that we have for you now that a bunch of you are here. Let me go over here to polls and launch this poll again. Eden, I might have a question for you. It looks like it says that let me click on relaunch poll. Okay. Sorry. I'm used to using that other application for screen sharing. So first poll coming up here, people were asking you, what is your relative experience with Webex Contact Center? And we'd like to know how new, intermediate, or advanced you are. Looks like the breakdown is they're brand new, greater than 1 year, 2 years plus. Geez, I just started this stuff last week, so I'd have to answer beginner with that poll question there. I'm just kidding there. That's not really true. But we'll let this poll run here for a couple more seconds. Again, and it looks like for the most part, most of you have been working with WebEx a little bit. Some of you are brand new. Those of you that are brand new, we've got some fine classes we could have you attend, and you be no longer a beginner. That seems good. Those of you working on this solution for more than 2 years, by all means, feel free to add in some recommendations, or if you hear me say some awkward things along the way here, by golly, I'm okay with your input as well. All right, so over 100 of you have answered that poll. I'm going to end that poll. Hopefully that's okay with Eden. And we will share the results with you. I assume that goes out to you somewhere that you can see shared. So looks like a majority of you have some intermediate experience, about 55%. On the other end of that, about 15% have advanced experience, and somewhere in the middle, 30% of you are newerish to WebEx Contact Center. From an on-prem solution, and keep in mind in our classes, one of the things we do is try to put information like for like, right? We try to give you information about, well, it used to be called this over here in this solution, but now you're dealing with these topics over here. So please join us if you can for some classes. All right, that's a little bit of the marketing stuff up front, a little bit more in the end, certainly more detail on the advanced admin course coming up. Let's move forward. Some helpful links that you're going to find that we'll reference along the way within this session. First off is the Control Hub. The Control Hub, if you're brand new or newerish to the world of WebEx, there's really only one URL you'd have to remember. That would be admin.webex.com. This is the beginning baseline interface for all things you're going to do within the WebEx environment, including contact center functionality. So we will take a look at that in a live demo session. Log in there. We also, for purposes of this discussion, certainly used a whole lot of information found in the WebEx Contact Center setup and administration guide. We'll point that out along the way, but it certainly has a lot more detail if you want information after the fact about additional things you could use to customize the desktop layout. Certainly a very helpful guide. We're also going to find that part of what we do today involves, again, personalizing the desktop layout, adding cool images and reports and things that have happened. Also with logos and icons and various things that will show up in place of the links that we've added to click on. And a lot of those icons really come from Momentum. Momentum is a way to use some icons that are, if you will, built into the system. You don't have to reference via a long URL. We can use these Momentum icons. So a listing here of icons that you can get to, and I'll point all these out along the way as we progress. All right, so let's start off with an overview of the desktop layout, show you exactly what the desktop is, what it looks like by default, and explain to you a couple of high-level aspects of personalizing that desktop layout. First off, this is the desktop layout for the WebEx Contact Center solution. This happens to be actually an agent desktop layout here, the Supervisor desktop layout. Similar, has more things going on, if you will. And what we're pointing out here simply on this page is really just the areas that we can layout. By default, you can see over here, this desktop layout has a just a standard logo and says Webex Contact Center over here in option 1 on the left-hand side. That's the title and logo area. The horizontal hair right up top here in the middle, also an area we can do some personalization of. We'll find we're going to add some new applications over here in the form of chat in the middle. On the middle, we see the workspace area. The workspace area, normally when we're occupied with a call, email, some kind of a contact, we'd actually see more information about the customer on that side. When we're in somewhat of an idle state, this is the default logo that shows up in the background. We'll show you how we could customize that and maybe add our own. We also see on the left-hand side the navigation bar. The navigation bar is what an agent supervisor would click on to navigate between different screens. And by default, we see a couple of options here. The home page that we can see by default, agent performance by default show up for an agent desktop layout. We'll show you at the end of the session, we've added some more links over there to the navigation bar that involves our personalization or customization of our reports, by example. Supervisor desktop layout, again, a little bit busier, more things going on with the supervisor desktop layout. Most easily seen on the left-hand side, you'll notice in the navigation bar seems to be more default options that a supervisor has. Also important to note that in this solution, especially if you're newer, as a supervisor logs in, a supervisor in this solution has a choice when logging in to either be a supervisor only or a supervisor / agent. And we're going to refer to these three things we've just looked at as three different personas. We looked at the agent persona, we look at a supervisor persona, and we look at a user who's a supervisor and an agent. Now, a supervisor is a supervisor, but all supervisors are by default agents as well. So if you want your supervisor to also perhaps help with taking calls, they'd be logging in as a supervisor and an agent. And again, it's these three personas that we can make the desktop layout quite different for each one of those three types of individuals logging in. So that's just a quick view of what the default desktop layouts look like. These desktop layouts, of course, are controlled on a per team basis. Teams over here in the world of Webex Contact Center, nothing to do with teams over there in the world of CCE. Teams over here are elements or objects that we can route calls or emails to. They're just simply collections of agents. Teams are very powerful over here. Teams are a handy way to inherit things like a skill profile, maybe a multimedia profile. If you don't know what those are, come back for some training. And when an agent goes to log in, by example, to Supervisor 99, first off, picking a role here, that's going to determine where in the desktop layout the layout actually comes from. We, of course, have to put in the number where we're going to be receiving phone calls from. And really cool thing over here in Webex Contact Center, we get to pick a team when you log in. You can inherit different things like different multimedia profiles, different skill profiles, and different desktop layouts, which of course we're here to talk about for each one of those teams that you're perhaps a member of. So that makes things super cool over here. We might have a different layout for sales, different layout for support, different functionality, different skills that we can inherit, different multimedia profiles for each of the teams we're members of. So I like that quite a lot over here in the world of Webex. Very powerful ability to change things dynamically when people log in. Very powerful way to reskill people. Okay, great. We're just looking at teams in the previous screen. We saw that team layouts are found in a different section, either within the control hub or the old school legacy contact center management portal. And all we're simply looking at here is that by default, this JSON file, this JavaScript object notation file, is really a file that we use to personalize what we're seeing in the form of Java applets that are running in the background, doing things for us. The desktop layout helps us to personalize things like the logo and icons, et cetera, et cetera. Starting point here, if you're going to personalize the layout, of course, is to go to the default desktop layout named global layout. And handy link right here in the middle allows you to download that desktop layout. And of course, customize that with your favorite text editor, as we'll show you along the way. And then once you're done with that layout, of course, at the end, you're going to upload a new file to the desktop layout that's going to be verified and validated by the system. Make sure you don't have any typos going. And then, of course, we can apply that new desktop layout to the team. Again, we'll show you this live towards the end of this presentation. Let me do a quick pause here real quick. Renee, that's okay. I see you selected beginner by mistake. That's all right. We're okay. Let's see. A couple of questions going on here. Somebody says just one desktop layout per team. There is, but it's quite easily to have different desktop layouts configured, I suppose. And does this mean I can choose a team at login? That is a true statement. That's a very powerful piece of the logging in that we really try to enforce in our classes, of course, is that instead of assigning things on a per agent basis, assign things as possible to a team. And again, becomes a mighty convenient way to have different layouts as well as effectively dynamically reskill people. The other benefit of teams is as an agent supervisor, you don't actually have to log all the way out to switch teams. I'll show you that in the desktop. There's a little place to click where you can simply change teams quite handily without logging all the way out. And that's a fairly cool feature I find over here. Okay, so hopefully that answers those Q&A questions. And can we revert that back to the original if need be? Absolutely, right? Of course, we're going to save a copy of the default layout, but fine questions, people. Let's progress on. Okay, so at this point in time, what we've got is we've got this default desktop layout on the screen loaded up in our favorite browser. I'm sorry, not our favorite browser, our favorite text editor, whatever that might happen to be. And a couple of things worth pointing out to you here, just on the main page, big picture, is that this desktop layout file is, almost 2,000 lines of code, more or less, at least, 1,300 or so. So where do you even start? Well, what you start with is an understanding that this desktop layout is first off laid out based on personas, and the three persona types we're looking at here on line 2. One persona is all the configuration that an agent would see in their desktop layout. Second persona would be what layout would a supervisor only see on their desktop layout. And the third persona is, of course, if that supervisor chose to log in as both a supervisor and an agent, that's where that portion of the code begins. So the numbers, the lines over here are current as, of course, last week when put all this stuff together, but that desktop layout has a right to change over time as it does in the cloud. So those are approximate areas, but should still be valid for what's going on there with the desktop layout. Underneath each of those personas, some top level properties we'll discuss in more detail for each type of user. Here's the top level properties for the agent user. Here are some top level properties for the supervisor agent user. And again, we'll discuss more of those in detail coming up here shortly. Nice thing about a JSON file is even if you're somebody like me who got kicked out the same sense, you can handily look at these files and say, oh, okay, well, they're pretty plain text based. I could probably figure out some things like, guess my logo is probably going to go there in that logo field. Things of that nature. So again, more information coming up 1 second. Underneath each top level portion for each persona, we see an area module. And under the area module, we're going to see other at here on this particular slide is the area module up top, and directly underneath there is another submodule named advanced header. And what we're simply pointing out to you here is that is exactly what would be available to a user up top right-hand side within their desktop layout. We see that by default, it looks like we've got some telephony option going on here. We see a little notification bell that's enabled. That's for our notification center. We see an ability over here on the right-hand side to maybe change our agent state from available to not ready state, take calls, not take calls, emails, chats, etc. And you'll notice that these numbers are listed as 2, 3, and 4. You're wondering, hey, what happened to number 1? Well, number 1 we'll configure shortly. Number 1 would be maybe using this area layout to customize or personalize, adding in integration with Webex app, in this case for chat purposes. So that's one of the areas we're going to customize. Now, one thing to maybe keep in mind as you would look at this JSON file, if you're to get to the supervisor only persona, remember supervisors only don't actually have an ability to log in and take calls because they're not acting as an agent in this particular case. So not all of these objects underneath this advanced header submodule might show up if you go looking closer at the supervisor persona, by example. Continuing on downstream, looking at basically the default layout of these files, at some point in time under the advanced header section or module of the screen, you'd come across something maybe listed as panel on the screen. And the panel basically equates to your workspace objects. Your workspace objects would be objects you would see when you're actually in process of taking a contact of some kind, call or email in this particular case. And you'll see some options that some of which are enabled, some of which may not be enabled out there. By example, by default, what we can see is there's contact history that shows up when a customer calls in, sends an email in if we've talked to them previously, customer we're conversing with. We'll show you that by default, no screen pops are enabled, but we'll show in this demonstration, it's pretty easy to add a simple screen pop. And there's some other options that we could also go forth with configuring. Some of them may require some additional programming. By example, like earning applications. We won't talk about that in here too much, but other things you could, of course, customize. And again, the default setup and administration guide would help you with that, as well as other documentation, by example, how to set up the customer experience journey. Still below there is another area that we are concerned with, the home page submodule. It's still under this area layout as a top module up above, but we keep scrolling down. Notice we're down to line 888 now. Area is really where we're starting with the navigation section and being able to customize / personalize the area over here on the left-hand side we said in the navigation bar. By default, we would find that supervisors would actually see a lot more information, by example, on their home page. Right? This is the home page we're looking at for supervisor persona, supervisor agent personas. And supervisors, of course, as you might expect, would see a lot more detail about what's going on in the contact center than would an agent, by example. Supervisors have an ability to look at queues and channel types and different teams, et cetera, et cetera. So they have a more busy interface. And we're simply calling out that as you look through these sections within that just desktop layout by default, they definitely relate to those 4 places within the desktop layout we said we could provide some personalization to. So we haven't done anything yet. We're just simply making note of where we can find information. Navigation submodule, we can see that by default is where we'd see some things like team performance statistics and recordings that would be available in this case to maybe this desktop layout laid out in order of things that we see. So let's see what it would take to maybe do some personalization of this desktop layout. What kind of things could we easily add to this desktop? I'll show you when I get into the live section that it's pretty convenient to actually, if you're trying to do personalization, how do you do that? Should I be logged in as an administrator who's also an agent? What should I do? I found the best way for me was to do personalize the supervisor agent layout. Log into Webex to do some things as a supervisor, having admin capabilities, and then, of course, test this out by logging in as the supervisor themselves. So up top, what have we done with our layout. We've done a couple of simple customized things. First off, up top in the app title, we've simply given it a name that might be more meaningful to our organization. Here, I've just named it the Student 99 Custom Desktop Layout. Layout demo, and we've affected is basically the top navigation piece within the desktop layout. I've also added in here a Daffy Duck profile as just a simple JPEG, a little bit hard to see on this particular screen, but that's what you're looking at actually right up top left-hand side over here. That's the Daffy Duck logo. And the task page illustration field is the I've simply added in a fancy sunset desktop layout. All this with about, 12 seconds of real work. We'll also talk to you about enabling this drag and drop functionality. Drag and drop will allow agent supervisors to maybe customize their own layout if they don't like the way bigger or smaller. This will allow them to do that. We've also, on this particular screen, enabled Webex. Webex configure. Now, what is that actually going to do? Well, if a new icon that shows up on the middle top right-hand section, and that's effectively going to allow us to have chat functionality from the Webex application itself. What's going on there? That previous screen, maybe not on the previous screen, we've added a screen pop to the layout. And the screen pop actually is somewhat enabled by default, but we have to have a screen pop configured. So here I'm simply showing you that as part of a flow, a call flow that we would have built to do IVR and ACD function, a call answers the call. I've simply added a simple screen pop activity, a node type device to the flow. And that screen pop activity is simply going to go out, in this case, pop the sunsetlearning.com screen pop. It has a desktop layout that shows up, and I'm popping that simply inside my browser window. So as an agent would see when a call arrives, they, by example, see the screen pop show up. The title of the screen pop itself matches our configuration, and of course the content. That's our Sunset Learning homepage. So screen pops, pretty easy things to do. All right, we're keeping rolling here, people.
There's also a couple of questions in the Q&A if you want to take a minute for those.
Let's take a peek at those. Let's see, is there a way to view the format of a desktop layout with assigning it to an agent and logging in without the need to consume license by creating a test user? That's one question we have here. I'm going to generally say not that I can think of off the top of my head right now. Keep in mind the persona that I'm using. I realize that takes a license, but I guess if you're close enough licensing with your agents, it seems like a bigger issue. So I'm going to say generally no. The best way to test the desktop layout is to see what happens when you log in as a user. Can all this be modified and viewed prior to pushing it live to the agent supervisor? So yes, that would be involved with testing, I would say. Right? Test the desktop layout, make sure it all looks okay before you roll it into production. So test queue, test teams, etc., test users if possible, and see what it looks like before you roll it out. That would be my answer anyway. I don't know if anybody else believes in that. And any versioning for the desktop layouts, the system doesn't really care per se about the versions. That would be a bit incumbent upon you to have maybe different versions of the JSON file itself. That's at least what worked for me. The system, if you upload a new version and overwrite the old one, it doesn't seem to allow you to come back to a different version. So I would say that would be up to the user, the administrator themselves. All right, hopefully that answered some of your questions. Let's proceed onward. Let's go here to the final section. Final section is actually customizing the desktop layout by adding a few keen reporting widgets to the desktop layout. And first goal here would be to say, let's just see if we can add a simple. Now understand that supervisors by default have an enormous amount of reports that they're actually looking at in the desktop layout. Agents have a minimal amount of reports, but you might have some cool special report that you want to add to the desktop layout that's not visible by default. How hard or easy would that be? As it turns out, quite easy overall, as long as you understand a little bit of the syntax. And by the way, this PDF copy of this presentation will make available to you after the fact. So it'll give you something to take with you. Of course, we'd encourage you to come to class where you'd actually get to do all this fine work. But at this point in time, what we're in is the navigation submodule. The navigation submodule was one of the final modules we looked at when we described the default layout. Very towards the bottom of the desktop layout if you're using the supervisor and agent persona. Notice we're down here in line 1139 by default. So we're in the supervisor and agent persona. And it looks like what we're doing here is in the nav section or in the nav sub module. Looks like we've added a simple iFrame widget as a label to the object we're adding. This icon over here called flag, that's actually going to be one of those momentum icons that we referenced. Didn't point this out earlier, but icons could actually come from your own set of icons, like that sunset logo came from our own set of logos and or icons. But here we're just going to use the flag icon, which is one of many numerous icons from that momentum collection. We gave you that URL earlier for how to get to those momentum collections of icons and see what they look like. We have a field here called navigate to. That's literally going to be a field that we see if we use the desktop layout in its web form, that would actually be part of the URL string that we see. So I've simply added in something somewhat bogus here. Check out browser URL for match. We'll see that show up shortly when we take a look at what we've done here. Alignment for right now is simply at the top of the list. That's your only alignment capabilities. And again, right here, how would I know what to put in? I'd hopefully have handy that supervisor, that admin and setup guide, which would be describing me what's going on in there. The page itself that we're adding in. And this is going to be a new icon, a new object in the navigation page. When we click on that icon, what's it actually going to bring up? Well, it's going to bring up a page with an ID. This ID will show up as something a user would be able to see and click on. We're going to use this flex layout. This flex layout would allow us to, if we want to, modify that page a little bit on our own as a user. And it looks like what we've added here is one widget. Widget is something new that we're adding, in this case, the desktop layout. We're adding, in this case, a widget named XYZ1. I've simply added kind of a bogus name in here to point out that this widget we're adding named XYZ1 is actually specifications here as far as where within the window it might show up. Now, since we're only in this case adding one report, we're going to find that the columns and rows that this report consumes within the window itself the key thing for making this layout actually work is that we've actually got an iFrame layout supplied here as basically our component type. You'd see more information in that guide we warned you about. And the other key thing is this right in the middle, this very long string is actually how we're getting to our new report we're trying to add in. We'll show you here on the next page. This report comes from our tenant ID, and this is the report ID that we're trying to add. Let me show you that a little bit more on the next page. Okay, so if we take a closer look using the stare and compare methodology, having a default layout up that we've actually done some work with, we can see better description of exactly what we've added in here. Again, in the nav page, we've added a new layout of a desktop. You can see on the middle of the layout over here, we've got our new flag icon. That's a momentum icon. It says a simple analyzer iFrame widget. So whatever label we've supplied here matches what a user would see when they hover over top of that icon. If they're to actually click on that icon and be using the web version of the desktop layout, notice at the end that navigate to piece is simply just a portion of the URL string that's supplied up there. Okay, so that seems all pretty good so far. See what actually happens with the report itself. Again, back in this widget that I've named XYZ1, XYZ1 just kind of a bogus name here, but XYZ1, where is it getting its information from? Where is the source of information? Well, here you might recognize this is just a simple URL to get us to the analyzer. The analyzer within the solution is our reporting tool that we use for reporting within the Webex environment. And one of the pretty cool reports within the analyzer built in by default under the business metrics section is this report labeled customer journey. Now, I don't really care what that report is named. What I care about is that report ID number. That report ID happens to be report ID 1183. You'll notice there's a dash in front of it or a minus sign, whatever you want to call that. So I not only have to specify what my tenant is my configuration, my WebEx environment, I also would have to specify here what the report ID is. And there's a very simple way to get this string to be put in here automatically. And that would be to simply navigate to the analyzer, bring up that report, and then reach up top and just grab your screenshot or grab the URL that you've navigated to. Paste that in there, off you go. That's all cool, but what does it look like? If I actually click on that simple analyzer iFrame widget, here's what I like about that report. This shows me a simple report within a single frame over here, a single page that I'm navigating to. And again, because I enabled that drag and drop functionality or modification functionality, a user could actually go down here to the bottom right-hand side, click on edit layout, and maybe make that report larger or smaller to fit better within the confines of their desktop itself. A little bit more detail, if you add more than one report, they could actually put the bottom report to the top or top report to the bottom. So that's a very simple layout. And if you get in more in depth in actually studying this JSON file and looking at your options down there, you'll find that your mileage can vary here. There's very simple ways to add a single report to a layout. There's also more complex ways to add multiple reports to a layout. That's really what I'm done on this next set of slides here. So top portion of the new navigation widget I'm trying to add here, very similar to the last widget we added. It's got a label, called this the fancier analyzer iFrame widget. I've got a different momentum icon here. I'm using the tools icon instead of the previous icon I used. Also got a different navigation page layout. But then from there, it looks like what I've got going on is a couple of widgets that we've added to this configuration. And I think we break those out a little bit more in detail on the next slide. So top layout piece is all very similar. I've got one page in this particular case that I'm trying to add a couple of widgets to. I'm trying to add a widget named ABC1. I'm also trying to add a widget named ABC2. Of course, ABC1 and ABC2 are just random names that I've provided here. Looks like these are both iFrame widgets that I'm trying to add in. One widget I'm trying to add in is going to have a wrapper around the report. That wrapper is going to have a simple label named track the call. Another report that I'm trying to add to the same page is a different report ID number for both these reports. It's also going to be wrapped up with a wrapper title of CSQ All Fields Fancy Report. And at the bottom of this layout, I have some ability to specify within the layout which report's going to show up first or last, how many columns and or rows of objects will I see. I'm only adding, in this case, 2 reports to this layout, so those will show out quite easily. Best way to see what your options are might be here would be to study the default layout for the supervisor. Supervisors have some layouts where they've got all kinds of reports on one page, and you get a much better idea of how to maybe modify that layout section. You can adjust layouts with having objects consume a certain percentage of the page, et cetera, et cetera. So more detail, again, in that setup and configuration guide. And it will also show you when you come back and attend our class. So at the end of the day, what I've done with this other additional object I've added to the navigation portion of the supervisor, they see a new icon show up. It's a little tools icon that showed up versus the flag icon we showed previously. They can see the label itself that I provided here, the fancier iFrame widget. If they were using the desktop layout web-based, they'd see a different URL that they appear to be navigating to. And these are simply the reports that are showing up, report ABC1 and ABC2 collectively within this window. Again, because I've enabled some layout modification at the user basis, they can actually climb down here and reorder those, move those windows around, resize them as needed to get out of that information what they're looking for. Okay. So that's pretty cool. That's what's going on there with our desktop layout. That's really all we had to share with you today for those purposes. Next step would be to get into some demo and Q&A, which I'll do here shortly, right after we talk to you a little bit more about the new Webex course coming out. We've got more and more poll option going for you. So let me do a pause right here and take a look at the Q&A window and see what kind of questions we have. Can we integrate the agent desktop into the Webex app? That's a pretty good question. I think what we saw here is we incorporated part of the Webex app into the desktop layout. That sounds like a pretty good question for people that work at Cisco, see what's happening in the future. I don't know if I know the answer to that question off the top of my head. Maybe, but I have not done it. If I need to prompt an agent, pop up with a message based on condition of flow, such as call received from somebody, please create a ticket. Can I accomplish this through the screen pop or any other way? I would say, yeah, we will kind of cover some of that a little bit, maybe. Well, somewhat in our advanced admin class. We get certainly a lot more creative with what we're trying to do with, by example, HTTP requests that might actually have to get things modified coming back the other direction. So I would say for that question, Rendala, maybe come back and attend our class, our advanced admin class, and we can use that maybe as a good thing to think about. This modification written on text editor, why isn't a tool provided to edit the agent desktop layout instead of writing it? I guess I'd have to say, well, the desktop layout is there. We don't have to write anything. We're just personalizing it with our favorite text editor, which could be, you know, just Notepad if you want to, I guess. That's going to be my answer to that. Is the widgets possibilities listed some way? Yes, in fact, it is. That would be that setup and admin guide that we talked about, buried in there somewhere. I can't quote your page number, but I've seen it in there. Where can we find the different icons available to use for our widgets? We talked about that actually at the very beginning of this. Again, you'll have a copy of this. I'm going to scroll back up towards the beginning and say that these momentum icons that we used come from Momentum Icons repository, which if you navigate to momentum.design/icons, you'll see the whole list of icons out there. And they're listed by name. Now, in my experience, there's you know, I don't know how many hundreds, if not thousands of icons listed out there. I tried some icons, they didn't all necessarily work. So there might be just a subset of icons we can use in the Cisco world, but there's definitely a lot of icons out there. How can we find different icons? We answered that. If you want to add more than one report widget, where is the beginning of each report section in the JSON file? We actually saw that in the JSON file itself when I added multiple widgets. Sorry if this is making you dizzy, but I'm going back down to adding multiple widgets to the layout. You can see here on the screen that I'm sharing out, I've got my two widgets. ABC1 is one of my report layouts. ABC2 is my second report that I'm seeing. How those are actually laid out on the desktop itself is controlled by the layout section, the area that you see down here and how much real estate it's going to be taking in perspective to the other objects that we've added. So hopefully that answers your question. Agent supervisor functionality is not available with Webex Contact Center this time. Okay, so somebody answered the question, right? So we can't, looks like, add that to Webex at this point in time. Can an agent be a standard agent to get the analytics to get in the URL desktop layout, or do they need to be a supervisor or assigned a profile that has access to analytics? Here's what I'm going to generally say for that. And I guess I thought maybe we were asking about reporting just in general, but remember, by default, agents can't get in and see and run reports, but we are basically providing here kind of a permalink equivalent, if you will, for reports. So I'm not sure how to answer that question, Terry. You might rewrite that and let me something I'm missing here. All right, let me continue on here and knock out the last couple slides that you want to know about. Then we'll take a look at a Q&A. You would want to be aware of this new Webex Contact Center Advanced course, WXCCA. Remember, that's different than AWXCC. If the A is the beginning, that's the beginning admin course. If the A is the end of the initialism, that's the advanced course. Talk to your salespersons. We will hopefully help you out with that. Put you in the right class. We've got some new guaranteed to run dates in April and as well as in May. Now remember, April is going to be really our first official run of that class, so I'm sure we'll learn some things along the way, but we would hope that you would join us for those. That would be great overall. Get signed up. Eden's asking me to put the next poll up there. Next poll to show you in this particular case. Sorry, where polls go to here? Polls. Back to our other poll. Here's our next poll. Next poll that we're pointing out here actually goes hand in hand with the information that we're proposing coming up in this new course, which if I go back to the beginning of the slide presentation, talk a little bit more about what we're proposing to be included in this new course. Current proposed modules include, of course, the module we just talked about here, customizing the desktop layout, but some other modules as well, getting deeper into the Google Dialogflow world, of course, getting deeper into APIs of all kinds, including contact center APIs. More advanced information on flows. This would include things like writing better or fancier formulas, using some functions, exposing more of the Pebble template commands that we can use in there. And advanced flows, we would say that would be advanced voice flows. That would also include maybe advanced flows within the digital channels world by building maybe and customizing WebEx Connect flows. And even incorporating some digital channels from a bot perspective. Keep in mind, bot is short for robot, so we might do some voice bots as well as some chat bots, by example. And getting, of course, a deeper dive into all things reporting would be also a good thing. So poll that's up there is meant to see what kind of interest you might have. It looks to me like everybody says all those are pretty good topics, right? So it says all those seem to be most helpful. And I guess I would agree with that. That was our theory of operation. We said, hey, what does it seem like people are clamoring for since the beginning of this initial admin class? And those are all pretty popular items. Of course, where does it end? It never ends. So we'll have more information coming up as well with other classes in the future, hopefully. And we appreciate you coming to class. So that's pretty good poll results. I will, looks like they're still going 62% participation. So if you're still out there, leave that poll up for a couple more seconds. I think we're about done with the presentation, at least slide-wise. I think I've hit up all those slides. Eden, did you have anything else that I should have covered there, or? didn't cover?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Eden points out in the chat window there that we also have some July and September dates as well. So that's cool. Let me get out of this presentation here. Let me end this poll. Share those results. We don't have any other Q&A sessions going on there, so I think we're pretty good. It's about 3 minutes, so I guess in 3 minutes time, let me just do a quick demo here of a couple of things that you might care about. In theory, if I open up Chrome here and navigate to the control hub, admin.webex.com, again, I found the easiest thing for me to do for testing purposes, which is what a couple of you had question-wise, is I built a supervisor. And supervisors have pretty powerful capabilities within the world of WebEx. So I'm logging in, notice as a supervisor of the control hub, and you go, why are you doing that? Well, because supervisors, maybe not via the control hub directly, but my supervisor has access still to the contact center management portal link. So as I'm going in here, making modifications, trying to get things set up for testing, I was logged in as my supervisor to the control hub, going up here to the provisioning module, and of course, going down to desktop layout and adding in desktop layouts as needed. And I can have a couple of different desktop layouts added so that I can easily switch between one or another. The desktop layout that I'm using for this adventure is one named Desktop Layout 99 with Analyzer. If I edit that layout, you can see it's in this desktop layout that I've got this JSON file that we just went over that's been uploaded. Version, so no version control in here. It's a little bit incumbent upon you to upload the correct version. And I can also see what teams this desktop layout might be assigned to. In this case, the Branch 99 Expert team is what I've got it associated with. If I actually go to teams, I can see that for my team that I'm incorporating or working with this week, Branch 99 Expert team, if I edit that team, this again is the place where I can get into and assign a desktop layout. So I've got the desktop layout 99 with Analyzer assigned. All right, that's step one. Step two, keep in mind if you're actually going to be doing this live, taking calls, somewhere we'd actually be needing to be logged on to WebEx. Now I've dismissed my WebEx window down at the bottom, but my WebEx window is into actually to get my phone functionality working. I think I must have got all the way out of that thing. That's cool. And the third piece of the equation is the agent desktop itself. I happen to be using the application version of the contact center desktop here on my screen, but again, the web version would work fine. Back in the control hub, you've actually got a shortcut here to go to the desktop from a quick links perspective. So that doesn't too much matter which one of those you use. But here I'm trying to log into the agent desktop piece as my supervisor and agent persona. Of course, I'm using an extension from WebEx calling that's going to be used. It doesn't really matter what I put in here because I won't be getting actually real calls, 2099. And again, I got to pick the team. I want to test my work. Hopefully, if I click submit here, you can see the new desktop layout I've got incorporated the Daffy Duck logo up top. It's got some new verbiage up top with what my layout looks like. I've added Webex Chat functionality to the desktop layout. And I've got, sorry about that, got a couple of new objects showing up on the left-hand side in the navigation. There's the simple analyzer iFrame widget. There's my fancy for flows this week. And right below that is the fancier iFrame widget, which in this case contains a couple of reports that I picked at random somewhat. And again, if I want to edit that layout as a regular user, I can put that report up top if I want to. And we'll happy with that report. I'm going to save that layout locally as it's preferred for me, the user. So that's pretty cool stuff. Hopefully we've shown you today some easy ways to modify your desktop layout, add some reports to it, add some logos, icons, personalize that desktop layout. And I guess that's about all the time we have for today. So we check to see if there's any final Q&A questions over here. And Jacqueline, how to add more than one widget to the left panel for reports. I think we covered that overall in that presentation, which we'll give you in the form of a PDF. So thank you very much, everyone. Audio towards the end was a little bit better overall. We appreciate your time. And if you have any questions, please get a hold of us at sunsetlearning.com. Again, my name is Mike Keitzer, and thanks for hanging out with us today. So,
if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.